The emergency klaxon had been silent for 9,783 years. When it finally screamed to life in the central monitoring station of Sector 9, Administrative Coordinator Velish Kront didn't recognize the sound. He thought his coffee machine was dying. The coffee machine was not dying. The quarantine, however, was very dead. Velish had inherited his position from his predecessor, who had inherited it from her predecessor, who had inherited it from a long line of predecessors stretching back to when the job actually meant something. These days, being administrative coordinator of the oldest active quarantine zone was roughly as exciting as watching paint dry in a vacuum. Paint didn't dry in a vacuum, of course. That was rather the point. The actual job description, if anyone had bothered to read the 16,000-page manual gathering dust in the station's archive, involved monitoring a planetary system that had been sealed off since the Great Catastrophe. A system so dangerous, so fundamentally wrong, that the founding species had unanimously agreed it should never be touched, approached, or thought about too hard after a pleasant dinner. Velish's typical workday involved drinking tea, filing reports that no one read, drinking more tea, watering his collection of sedentary fungi, and occasionally hitting the all systems nominal button with increasing existential dread about the meaninglessness of his existence. This particular morning had started no differently. He'd arrived at the station, nodded to the cleaning bot, made his tea, and sat down at his console to begin the sacred ritual of pretending to work. That's when the klaxon decided to have an opinion. The sound was horrible. Not just loud, but the sort of noise that evolution specifically designed nervous systems to find absolutely intolerable. Velish knocked his tea across 3 different keyboards, scrambled to find the manual override, and finally slammed his primary tentacle down on a button labeled, "Make it stop for the love of coherent space-time." The silence that followed was somehow worse. Velish stared at his screens. All 60 of them. Every single one was flashing the same message in letters that seemed personally offended by his existence. Quarantine breach. Containment failure. Evacuate to minimum safe distance of 12 parsecs. But, Velish said to his empty station, his voice squeaking in a way that would haunt him for years, "That's impossible." The screens disagreed. Emphatically. According to the telemetry, something had left the quarantine zone, not just left it, punched through it. The barrier field that had taken the combined efforts of 43 species and a power source that consumed the entire output of a dying star had just turned off, like someone had simply unplugged it. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no. The worst part was the time stamp. 3 months ago. Velish made a sound that his species reserved for moments of absolute metaphysical horror. The barrier had failed 3 months ago, and he was only finding out now? He frantically pulled up the diagnostic logs, his tentacles flying across multiple interfaces simultaneously. The barrier hadn't actually failed, technically speaking. According to the readings, it had been deactivated from the inside, using an access code that hadn't been used since the quarantine was established. An access code that, according to the historical records, had been destroyed along with the committee that created it, specifically to prevent this exact situation. "Computer," Velish said, his voice cracking, "trace the signal origin." The computer, which had last been asked to do actual work during the administration of Coordinator Velish's great-great-great-great-grandmother, took a moment to remember how. Then it displayed a trajectory. Velish followed the line with growing horror. Out of the quarantine zone, past the buffer territories, through the neutral expanse, straight into... "Oh," he whispered, "oh no." The trajectory led directly to the convergence, the single largest gathering of civilized species in this spiral arm. Hundreds of thousands of inhabited systems, trillions of beings, all the beauty and chaos of interstellar civilization crammed into one relatively small corner of space. Whatever had been locked away in that quarantine for 10,000 years was now loose in the most densely populated region of known space, and had been for 3 months. Velish did what any rational being would do in this situation. He pulled up the emergency contact list, a document so old it still referenced species that had gone extinct during the last ice age of his homeworld, and started making calls. The first 7 numbers were disconnected. The 8th went to someone's personal residence, where a very confused retiree informed him that the Emergency Response Directorate had been dissolved 6,000 years ago due to budget cuts. The 9th number, after 17 transfers and a hold that played music from a civilization that no longer existed, finally connected him to someone who claimed to be able to help. Undersecretary Thremix of the Department of Ancient Concerns listened to Velish's increasingly panicked explanation with the sort of patience that suggested he dealt with crazy people on a regular basis. "Let me understand this correctly," Thremix said slowly. "You're calling to report that the Death World quarantine, the one from the founding era, has been breached." "Yes." "The quarantine that was established before my species developed written language." "Yes." "The one that everyone agrees is a myth perpetuated by the Historical Preservation Society to justify their funding." "It's not a myth," Velish shrieked. "It's real. I'm sitting in the monitoring station right now." There was a long pause. "There's a monitoring station?" Thremix asked. Velish spent the next 20 minutes explaining his job, the quarantine, and the current crisis, while Thremix occasionally made noises that suggested he was reconsidering his life choices. "And you're certain," Thremix finally said, "that something escaped?" "Escaped, yes, 3 months ago, and it went to the Convergence." Another pause, longer this time. "Coordinator Kront, I need you to remain calm. I'm going to transfer you to the Department of Potential Extinction Events. They handle this sort of thing." "Potential?" Velish clutched his desk with all 6 tentacles. "There's nothing potential about this. The entire reason for the quarantine was that the planet inside was classified as a Class 12 death world. Do you know what that means?" "Actually, no. The classification system only goes up to Class 8. "Exactly!" The transfer went through, then went through again, and again. By the time Velish reached someone who would actually listen, he'd been passed between 19 different departments, 3 of which claimed to be fictional, and 1 which turned out to be an automated menu system that had achieved sentience, but was too polite to mention it. Director Yentril of the Theoretical Crisis Management Division finally took him seriously. Mainly because Yentril had access to the historical archives and could actually verify that the quarantine existed. "Sweet, merciful entropy," Yentril breathed, scrolling through 9,000 years of sealed records. "This is real. The founding species actually did this. They locked away an entire star system and told everyone to forget about it." "Can you read the classification report?" Velish demanded. Yentril opened the file, then closed it, then opened it again, very slowly, as if hoping the words would change. "This planet," Yentril said quietly, "contains life forms that consider volcanic eruptions minor weather events. Their dominant predators use neurotoxins that can kill most species by proximity. Their plants are carnivorous. Their weather has moods. And that's just the environment. The actual life that evolved there." "Yes?" "The report just says do not engage," in letters that take up an entire page. "Keep reading," Yentril scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. "The atmospheric oxygen content alone would be lethal to 60% of known species. The gravity is classified as punitive. The local bacteria are listed as potential weapons of mass extinction. The committee notes suggest that the planet itself seemed to be trying to kill the survey team. One member wrote, and I quote, "We have discovered hell and it has seasons." "Now you understand," Velish said. "But why was it quarantined instead of just avoided? We have plenty of death worlds that we simply don't visit. What made this one special?" Velish's voice dropped. Read the section on indigenous intelligence. Yentril scrolled to the end of the document. There, in a section marked with enough warning symbols to decorate a small moon, was a single paragraph. After careful observation, the survey team has concluded that the planet has produced a sapient species. This species has somehow thrived in an environment that our exobiologists describe as aggressively unsurvivable. They appear to be apex persistence hunters with remarkable problem-solving abilities and a disturbing tendency to adopt the planet's most dangerous fauna as companions. Recommendation: immediate quarantine. These beings must never be allowed to discover faster-than-light travel. If they do, the galaxy as we know it will fundamentally change in ways we cannot predict and definitely cannot control. Yentril set down their reading device very carefully. "And they're out?" Yentril asked. "For 3 months. And they went to the convergence. Straight to it. And we don't know where they are now. I don't even know what they look like." Yentril pulled up a priority alert system that hadn't been used since the Cascade Wars 3 millennia ago. The interface was so old that it required actual typing, a skill that Yentril had to look up. "I'm issuing a galactic alert," Yentril said. "All stations need to report any unusual activity, any unexplained phenomena, any species they don't recognize, anything that might help us locate these—" "What did the report call them?" Velish pulled up his own copy. "Humans. Humans," Yentril repeated. "We're looking for humans." The alert went out through channels that had been dusty with disuse. It bounced through relay stations, bureaucratic offices, and administrative centers across dozens of sectors. Most ignored it. A few read it and assumed it was spam. One particular message reached the desk of Portmaster Kixel at Convergence Hub Station 93, who was having a very bad day that was about to get much worse. Kixel was dealing with a docking dispute between 2 cargo haulers who both claimed berth priority, a waste recycling malfunction that was producing smells that violated 3 different treaties, and a persistent headache that no amount of medication would touch. The alert appeared on their screen. Kixel skimmed it, snorted, and was about to delete it when something caught their eye. Species designation: human, potentially dangerous. Approach with caution. If encountered, do not engage. Report location immediately. Kixel pulled up their station manifest and ran a species search. 3 results. 3 humans currently on the station. Kixel felt their headache intensify. The beings from the 10,000-year quarantine, the ones causing a galactic panic, were here, on this station, and had been here for— Kixel checked the registration timestamps. 11 weeks. "Computer," Kixel said wearily, "pull up all activity logs for the registered humans. I need to know what they've been doing." The computer compiled the data. Kixel stared at the results, their confusion growing with each line. The humans had arrived on a small vessel of unknown design. They'd registered with the immigration office, paid their docking fees, and proceeded to— nothing alarming. One had taken a job at a maintenance facility. Another was working at a restaurant. The third appeared to be attending classes at the station's educational center. "This doesn't make sense," Kixel muttered. "They're supposed to be dangerous." They pulled up the security footage from the humans' arrival. 3 beings, bipedal, oddly proportioned, wearing simple clothing. They'd walked through customs, filled out forms, asked questions about housing, and behaved exactly like any other new arrivals. Kixel watched the eldest human, a female named Petra Valdez, according to the manifest, approach the customs agent. "Excuse me," Petra had said in perfectly functional common galactic, "but I need to register a vessel that doesn't appear in your database. It's from a system that— well, it's complicated." The customs agent had barely looked up. "Fill out form D892. Next!" Kixel fast-forwarded through weeks of footage, the humans going about their lives, working, eating, sleeping. The younger 2, identifying as siblings named Tarek, and Lena Okonkwo had even joined a local sports league. Nothing, absolutely nothing that suggested these were beings that required a 10,000-year quarantine. Unless... Kixelle pulled up the maintenance logs from Petra's workplace. The facility serviced environmental systems for the station's residential sectors. Critical work, but routine, except the logs showed something odd. Maintenance requests had dropped by 40% since Petra started. Equipment failures were down. The entire sector's environmental systems were running more efficiently than they had in years. Kixelle checked Tarek's restaurant. Customer satisfaction was up, way up. The place had gone from a 3.2 rating to 4.8 in 2 months. Reviews mentioned something called comfort food and hospitality that made people feel strangely emotional. Lena's educational logs were even stranger. She'd enrolled in advanced xenobiology, a course known for its brutal difficulty. She was currently ranked first in her class. Her professor's notes included phrases like unprecedented intuitive grasp of biological systems and approaches problems from angles we never considered. "What are you?" Kixelle whispered at the screen. The priority alert on their console beeped again, this time with an addendum from Director Yentral. Urgent update. Analysis of historical quarantine records reveals humans are persistence hunters from an extreme death world. Consider them extremely dangerous. Their planet is classified as hostile to 98% of galactic life. They survived by chasing prey until it died of exhaustion. Recommend immediate containment and isolation pending full threat assessment. Kixelle read this, then read it again, then looked at the security footage of Petra helping an elderly Tessian carry groceries to their apartment. Something was very wrong here. Either the historical records were catastrophically inaccurate, or these humans were playing a very long game, or... Kixelle's communicator chirped. Security Chief Voran's face appeared, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Portmaster, we have a situation in Sector 15. "What kind of situation?" "The complicated kind. One of the humans is involved." Kixelle felt the universe conspiring against them. "Which one?" "The young male. Tarek. He's... well, you should probably see this yourself." And then the security footage showed a corridor in Sector 15, an area known for its rough reputation and frequent disturbances. A group of 6 Krelton dockworkers, species known for their aggression and substance abuse issues, had cornered a small pipsit trader against a wall, and standing between them was Tarek. The human looked absurdly out of place. He was smaller than the Kreltons, wearing a ridiculous garment marked with symbols from his restaurant, and holding what appeared to be a bag of food supplies. "Walk away," the lead Krelton growled. "This doesn't concern you." Tarek didn't move. "Can't do that. You have no idea what we'll do to you, soft skin." "Probably something unpleasant," Tarek agreed. His voice was calm, too calm. "But you're not touching Pip, so let's figure out another option." The Kreltons laughed. The Pipsit trader, identifying from the manifest as Squeak Whistle, cowered behind Tarek's legs. What happened next took exactly 8 seconds and violated numerous laws of reasonable behavior. The lead Krelton lunged. Tarek moved, not away, toward. He stepped inside the Krelton's reach, did something with his hands that the camera couldn't quite follow, and suddenly the Krelton was on the ground, arm twisted at an angle that looked unpleasant. The other 5 rushed in. Tarek dropped his grocery bag and proceeded to demonstrate why humans had survived their death world. He was fast. Not faster than the Kreltons in pure speed, but faster in the way that mattered. He knew where they were going to be before they did. Every movement was efficient, economic, no wasted motion. He used their own momentum against them, redirecting their charges into walls, into each other, into structural supports. One Krelton got a solid hit on Tarek's shoulder. The human grunted, stumbled and kept moving. Another strike caught his ribs. Tarek wheezed and smiled. He was smiling. "Good hit," Tarek said cheerfully, ducking under a wild swing. "You guys have some power behind those punches." The Kreltons weren't used to prey that complimented them mid-fight. It threw off their rhythm. Tarek exploited every hesitation, every moment of confusion, until all six were on the ground, groaning. Tarek picked up his grocery bag, checked the contents, and sighed at a crushed package. "Oh, man, the cookies didn't make it." He helped Squeak Whistle to their feet. "You okay, Pip?" The Pipsit squeaked affirmatively, trembling. "Good. Come on, let's get you home. These guys aren't going to bother you anymore." Tarek looked down at the Kreltons. "Right? We're all friends now?" The lead Krelton, still clutching his arm, nodded frantically. "Excellent." Tarek walked away with Squeak Whistle, whistling something melodic. Kixel stopped the footage. "What? What was that?" "That," Vaughn said slowly, "is what humans do when you threaten someone they've decided to protect." We pulled up more footage. Last week, Petra intervened in a domestic dispute in Sector 32. 2 weeks ago, Lena helped break up a smuggling operation by accidentally discovering their warehouse while looking for a study group location. Accidentally. She said, and I quote, "The door was unlocked. I thought it was the classroom. And why were there so many unlabeled crates anyway? Seems suspicious." Kixel buried their face in their hands. "They're not trying to cause trouble. They're just being themselves. And that's causing trouble. It gets worse." "How?" Vaughn pulled up another file. "Remember the efficiency improvements in the environmental systems? Petra didn't just fix problems. She redesigned parts of the system using principles that our engineers don't recognize. When we asked her about it, she said she was applying basic thermodynamic theory that she learned in what translates as high school." And Tarek's restaurant success? He introduced something called spices to the menu. Turns out most species have a euphoric response to certain chemical compounds that humans naturally combine with their food. He's not trying to drug anyone. He's just cooking. The way humans cook. On a planet where everything is trying to kill you, apparently food needs to be exciting, or you die of boredom. Kixel felt a migraine forming. What about Lena? Her xenobiology professor submitted a paper based on her theory about symbiotic evolutionary patterns. It's being hailed as potentially revolutionary. When asked where she learned this, she said she used to spend summers volunteering at what translates as an animal rescue center on her homeworld. An animal rescue center? Their planet has carnivorous plants, venomous weather, and predators that hunt by exhaustion. And they have animal rescue centers. They're rescuing animals on a death world. Kixel pulled up the galactic alert again and read the details more carefully. The historical records painted a picture of a nightmare planet where survival itself was an act of defiance against a hostile universe. But they'd missed something. The records focused on the danger, the hostility, the sheer wrongness of the planet. What they hadn't considered was what kind of species could not only survive that environment, but thrive in it. A species that saw problems and fixed them, that saw danger and faced it with a smile, that looked at a universe trying to kill them and decided to make friends with it anyway. "Computer," Kixel said quietly, "pull up the immigration records again." "How exactly did the humans explain their presence here?" The document appeared. Kixel read Petra's statement given to the board customs agent 11 weeks ago. "We found an old satellite in orbit around our planet. Took us 3 months to get it working. Turns out it was some kind of beacon with a navigation system attached. We figured, why not? Our planet's getting crowded anyway, and the stars look lonely. So we built a ship, followed the coordinates, and here we are." "Is there a form we need to fill out?" The customs agent had given her Form D-892 and moved on to the next arrival. Kixel felt the full weight of the situation crash down on them. The quarantine hadn't failed. The humans hadn't broken out. They'd found the monitoring satellite, the one device that was supposed to remain hidden and passive, and turned it into a roadmap. They'd used the very tool meant to contain them as an invitation to the rest of the galaxy. And they'd done it not through violence or aggression, but through sheer, bloody-minded human curiosity. Portmaster, Vaughan's voice interrupted their existential crisis. Director Yentral is demanding a direct conference. What should I tell them? Kixel looked at the security footage of Tarek helping Squeak Whistle home, at Petra's efficiency reports, at Lena's academic achievements, and made a decision that would either save their career or end it spectacularly. Tell Director Yentral that the humans are indeed on this station. Tell them that we have been monitoring them closely for the past 11 weeks. And tell them, Kixel paused, tell them the humans are exactly as dangerous as the historical record suggested, just not in the way anyone expected. The conference call with Director Yentral and Coordinator Kront was the most surreal conversation of Kixel's life, and they'd once negotiated a peace treaty while experiencing a severe allergic reaction to their own translator implant. Let me clarify, Yentral said slowly. The humans have been living on your station for 11 weeks, and you're only now reporting this. In my defense, Kixel replied, I only received the alert 6 hours ago. They've been registered in our system as routine immigrants. We have 3 million beings on this station. I can't personally vet every single arrival. But surely someone noticed something odd about them. They paid their docking fees on time, passed all health screenings, and found employment within a week. By our standards, they're model citizens. Coordinator Kront's voice crackled through the comm. Model citizens? These are Death Worlders from a Class 12 planet. They should be, I don't know, conquering something, being terrifying. They are terrifying, Kixel insisted, just not in the traditional sense. They're terrifying because they're helpful. They fix things. They improve things. They make friends. Do you understand how unsettling that is? Silence on the line. No, Yentral finally said. I don't. Explain. Kixel pulled up their compiled reports. Petra Valdez has increased environmental system efficiency in her sector by 40%. She's done this by identifying problems that our sensors didn't detect, applying solutions that our engineers didn't consider, and working overtime without being asked because, and I quote, the air quality was bothering her, and she had some ideas. That's good, Yentral said uncertainly. It's unnatural. No species works that hard for no immediate benefit. What about the others? Tarek Okonkwo has transformed a failing restaurant into the most popular dining establishment in 3 sectors by introducing chemical compounds into the food that trigger pleasure responses in most species' brains. That sounds like poisoning. It's seasoning. He calls it flavor, and beings are paying for it, voluntarily. Kront made a strangled noise. And the third? Lena Okonkwo is revolutionizing xenobiology by applying observational techniques from her homeworld, where apparently studying life forms requires not dying while doing so. She's developed threat assessment instincts so refined that she once identified a dangerous parasite infection in a classmate by smell alone. That's a survival trait, Yentral said. That's a predator trait. Yes, but she used it to help. She took her classmate to medical services. She probably saved their life. I don't understand the problem, Kront said. They sound nice. That's the problem, Kixel shouted. They're nice. They're friendly and helpful and competent, and they're doing it all on a station where 90% of the species present would die in hours on their homeworld. They're living among us like it's normal, like the universe isn't supposed to be difficult. Yentral was quiet for a long moment. Portmaster Kixel, are you suggesting that the reason humans were quarantined wasn't because they were aggressive? I'm suggesting that whoever made that decision saw exactly what I'm seeing now. A species that doesn't just survive impossible odds. They ignore impossible odds. They look at a hostile universe and just decide it's not hostile anymore. And somehow they make it work. That doesn't explain why they'd need to be locked away for 10,000 years, doesn't it? Kixel pulled up another file. I did some digging in our historical archives, cross-referenced the quarantine date with galactic events. Want to know what was happening 10,000 years ago? Enlighten me. The founding era, when the first spacefaring species were establishing the protocols that would eventually become the convergence. When they were trying to figure out how to make dozens of wildly different species work together without killing each other. It was chaos. Constant wars, territorial disputes, cultural misunderstandings took 3,000 years to sort out. Your point? My point is that humans fix problems, instinctively, aggressively, and 10,000 years ago, the founding species found a planet full of beings who would look at their chaotic mess of a developing galactic civilization and immediately start helping, whether anyone wanted help or not. Yentril's voice grew very quiet. You think they were quarantined to give the rest of us time to figure things out without human interference? I think, Kixel said carefully, that the founding species took one look at these persistent, problem-solving Deathworlders and realized that humans would either save us or completely reorganize us before we were ready. So they put them in a box with a note that said, "Do not open until civilization is stable." And now they're out. And now they're out. Kront's voice was shaking. What do we do? That, Kixel said, is an excellent question. The answer came from an unexpected source. While the three administrators were panicking across multiple light years of communication, Petra Valdez was having her own crisis. A much more immediate one involving a coolant leak in Sector 48 that was threatening to cascade into a station-wide emergency. She'd been reviewing routine maintenance reports, a task her supervisor had deemed unnecessary but harmless, when she noticed the pressure readings. They were within acceptable limits, barely within acceptable limits, and trending in a direction that made her engineering instincts scream. "Rax," she called to her supervisor, a long-suffering Quellian who had initially been suspicious of the strange new hire, but had slowly warmed to her inexplicable competence. "These coolant lines in 48. When were they last serviced?" Rax checked his terminal. 30 cycles ago. They're not due for another 70. They're going to fail in 6. The readings don't suggest that. The readings are wrong. Petra pulled up a detailed schematic. Look, the pressure variance is cyclic. It spikes every 32 hours. That's not normal. That's a structural weakness in the line, creating a vibration pattern. Every spike adds stress. The line's going to rupture, and when it does, the pressure differential will create a cascade that'll take out the entire sector's cooling system. Rax looked at the data, then at Petra, then back at the data. How can you possibly know that? Because this exact problem killed 60 people on a drilling platform in the Gulf of Mexico 300 years ago. We studied it in university as an example of why you never trust that readings within acceptable limits actually mean everything's acceptable. What's a Gulf of Mexico? Not important right now. Petra was already pulling up maintenance schedules. We need to shut down that line and replace the damaged section before the next pressure spike. That requires approval from port operations, and they're not going to shut down an entire sector's cooling for 6 hours based on a feeling. Petra's expression did something that Rax would later describe as terrifyingly determined. It was the look of a woman whose species had survived everything a malevolent universe could throw at them by refusing to accept that anything was impossible. "Then we don't tell them," she said simply. "What?" "The damaged section is accessible from the maintenance tunnels. 2-person job. We go in, swap out the compromised line segment, and have everything back online before anyone notices. The readings will still look acceptable, so no one will be watching." That's insane! It's against regulations. We could be fired. Petra grabbed her toolkit. Or we could save several hundred lives. Your choice. She headed for the door. Rax watched her go, made a series of calculations about liability versus morality, cursed in 3 languages, and grabbed his own toolkit. "If we die doing this," he muttered, "I'm haunting you." "Get in line," Petra said cheerfully. "My high school physics teacher already called dibs." The maintenance tunnels of Convergence Hub Station 93 were never designed for routine access. They were cramped, poorly lit, and filled with the kind of ambient noise that made conversation require shouting. Petra navigated them like she'd been born there, which terrified Rax more than he cared to admit. "How do you know where you're going?" he shouted over the mechanical din. "Downloaded the station schematics on my first day, studied them during lunch breaks." "Why?" "In case I needed to navigate the maintenance tunnels." "That's not normal." "It is where I'm from." They reached the coolant line. Petra pulled out a scanning device and ran it along the pipe's surface, nodding to herself as the readings confirmed her suspicions. "There!" She pointed at a section that looked identical to every other section. Microfracture in the composite material. Probably from a manufacturing defect. It's been spreading with every pressure cycle. We're on cycle 983. It'll fail at cycle 996. How can you tell that from these readings? Math! Petra was already setting up the replacement procedure. And experience, and a really good understanding of material fatigue based on growing up in a place where everything eventually broke, and you learned to fix it before it killed you. They worked in synchronized chaos, Petra calling out instructions that Rax followed despite his certainty that this was all going to end badly. The replacement required temporarily increasing pressure in adjacent lines, a maneuver that was technically possible, but strongly discouraged by every safety manual ever written. "If this goes wrong," Rax said, watching pressure gauges climb toward red zones, "the entire sector floods with coolant. Then we don't let it go wrong." Petra sealed the final connection, checked her readings, and grinned. "Done, see? Easy." "That was not easy. Easier than replacing a hydraulic line on a deep-sea submersible while sharks tried to figure out if you were food." "What?" "Tell you later. Let's get out of here before someone notices we were gone." They made it back to their station with 3 minutes to spare before anyone thought to wonder where they'd gone. Petra filed a routine maintenance report, marked the coolant line as preemptively serviced, and went back to her regular work. 12 hours later, the pressure readings in Sector 48 showed the first signs of what would have been a catastrophic failure. Except there was no failure, because the line had been replaced. The automated systems flagged the discrepancy. Someone in port operations investigated. They found the maintenance report, cross-referenced it with the pressure data, and very slowly realized that a complete disaster had been averted by someone who shouldn't have known there was a problem. The report landed on Portmaster Kixell's desk just as they were finishing their conference call with Yentril and Kront. Kixell read it, then read it again, then very carefully set down their stylus before they could break it. What?" The conference call suddenly had everyone's attention. "Portmaster!" Yentril's voice was wary. "What's happening?" "One of the humans just prevented a coolant cascade that would have crippled an entire sector by performing unauthorized maintenance based on instinct and experience from a planet we've been actively avoiding for 10,000 years. Silence. "Well," Kront said eventually, "that's good. That's terrifying." She identified a problem our sensors missed, predicted a failure our system said was impossible, and fixed it using techniques that violate half our safety protocols. And she was right. "Portmaster Kixell," Yentril said slowly, "I'm starting to understand your earlier concerns. Are you? Because I'm looking at a species that spent 10,000 years locked on a planet that actively tried to kill them every single day, and their response was to get really good at not dying. And now they're here, applying those same survival instincts to our problems, and they're solving them." "You keep saying that like it's a bad thing," Kront protested. "It is, when our entire civilization is built on the assumption that some things are just too hard to fix. We have procedures, protocols, acceptable loss margins, and humans just ignore all of that. They look at impossible and say, 'Hold my beer,' and then do the impossible while making it look easy." Yentril's voice carried a note of growing realization. You're saying that humans are dangerous not because of what they might do to us, but because of what they might make us realize about ourselves. I'm saying that in 11 weeks, 3 humans have exposed flaws in our systems we didn't know existed, demonstrated efficiency standards we didn't know were possible, and consistently made us question why we do things the way we do them. And they're not even trying. This is just them existing. Can you imagine what happens when they actually put effort into something? The conference call dissolved into chaos as all 3 administrators began talking at once, each trying to process the implications of a species that had spent 10 millennia preparing for galactic civilization without even knowing galactic civilization existed. While they argued about protocols, containment, and whether the humans constituted a threat or an opportunity, Petra finished her shift and met her younger companions at their usual spot, a small observation deck overlooking the station's main hub. Tarek was still in his restaurant uniform, smelling like unfamiliar spices. Lena had her study materials tucked under one arm and looked exhausted but happy. "How was your day?" Petra asked. "Made a new dessert," Tarek said. "Called it chocolate lava cake. 3 different species asked if I was trying to poison them, then came back for seconds. You? Prevented a coolant cascade. Rax thinks I'm psychic now." "Neat." Lena sprawled on a bench. "I successfully identified a previously unknown parasitic infection using techniques Professor Vrelis said were creatively unorthodox." He meant it as a compliment, I think. They sat in comfortable silence, watching ships come and go through the vast windows. Beings of dozens of species going about their lives, unaware that 3 humans from a quarantined world were among them. "Do you think they know?" Lena asked quietly. "Know what?" Petra replied. "That we're not supposed to be here. That we were locked away." Tarek shrugged. "If they do, they haven't mentioned it. Everyone's been pretty friendly. Maybe that's why we were locked away," Petra mused. "Not because we're dangerous, but because someone thought the galaxy wasn't ready for us." "Were they right?" Lena asked. Petra watched a cargo ship maneuver into dock, guided by dozens of beings working in careful coordination. She thought about Rax's expression when they'd completed the coolant line repair, about Tarek's customers asking for dishes that reminded them of home, even though their homes were light years away, about Lena's professors finally understanding ecological patterns they'd been studying for decades. "I don't know," Petra said honestly, "but we're here now. Might as well make the best of it." "That's the most aggressively human thing you've ever said," Tarek laughed. "We're good at making the best of things," Lena pointed out. "It's kind of our whole deal." They sat together as the station rotated through its artificial day-night cycle, 3 humans in a galaxy that had spent 10,000 years trying to avoid them, completely unaware that their mere presence was causing administrative panic across multiple sectors. Because that was the thing about humans. They didn't need to conquer the galaxy or impose their will on anyone. They just needed to show up, be themselves, and let everyone else realize that maybe, just maybe, things didn't have to be as difficult as everyone assumed. It was, in its way, the most dangerous thing they could possibly do. Back in the administrative offices, Portmaster Kixel was coming to the same conclusion. "We need to make a decision," Kixel said, cutting through the ongoing argument. "The humans are here, they're not leaving. The question is what we do about it." "Containment," Kront suggested weakly. "They've been here 11 weeks and integrated completely. Any attempt at containment now would be seen as discriminatory. We'd have protests, legal challenges, and a public relations nightmare." "Deportation," Yentral tried. "To where? Their planet's still in quarantine. And even if we sent them back, what's to stop them from just leaving again? They figured it out once, they'll figure it out twice." "So what? We do nothing?" Kixel pulled up the files on all 3 humans. Their employment records, housing registrations, the growing list of small improvements and positive changes they'd brought to the station. "We tell the truth," Kixel said finally. "What truth?" "That they're here, They're not a threat in the traditional sense, and that maybe, just maybe, the quarantine was always going to fail eventually because you can't lock away a species whose defining trait is refusing to stay locked away. Yentral made a sound like escaping gas. You want to admit we lost track of a Class 12 Death World species for 3 months? I want to admit that the galaxy is about to change whether we're ready or not. The humans are out. They're going to spread. And when they do, they're going to take one look at all the problems we've accepted as unsolvable and start fixing them. We can either work with that or fight it. And fighting humans... Kixel looked at the footage of Tarek's intervention in Sector 15 again. Seems like a bad idea. Kront's voice was very small. So what do I tell the monitoring station protocols? Mark the quarantine as concluded. Update the status to integration phase. And hope that our descendants forgive us for what we're about to unleash on the galaxy. And that is, Yentral asked. Kixel looked at Petra's efficiency reports, Tarek's customer satisfaction ratings, Lena's academic achievements, and felt a profound sense of inevitability. Hope, Kixel said. We're unleashing hope. The dangerous, infectious, absolutely unstoppable human belief that things can always be better. And may whatever deities you worship help us all. The conference call ended. 3 months after humans left their 10,000-year quarantine, the Convergence's most experienced administrators sat in their respective offices, staring at reports that suggested their entire understanding of galactic civilization might need revision. Meanwhile, Petra, Tarek, and Lena finished their observation deck break and headed back to their respective homes, still completely unaware that their presence had caused anything unusual. They had work tomorrow. Petra had identified another efficiency improvement in Sector 27. Tarek was experimenting with something called curry that early taste tests suggested might be transcendent. Lena had a theory about symbiotic gut bacteria that her professors insisted was ridiculous but couldn't actually disprove. Just another day in the life of humans, doing what humans did best. Surviving, adapting, improving things, and absolutely refusing to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy would never be Actually, the galaxy would be many things. Louder, definitely. More efficient, probably. Significantly more spiced, without question. But quiet, not with humans around, not anymore.